Right. Hello and welcome to the CSA Cloud Bytes webinar on Stop Managing Compliance Like It's 1999, AI-driven GRC for the modern enterprise. I'm Travis Howerton. I'll be the host for the webinar today. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at RegScale. And today we're going to dive deep into some relevant topics about why compliance really hasn't changed much since 1999, what's broken with it today, and what are the best practices and how we fix it? What are we seeing in the market and what are the trends? When you think about AI and automation, how do you apply them in the real world in your context? What does winning look like? How do you measure it? And then what are some actionable next steps you can take away at the end of this webinar? To walk us through it, I've got two esteemed guests with me. First off is Dale Hoke. He's the Chief Information Security Officer here at RegScale. Dale, do you want to introduce yourself and your background?
Sure. So, as Travis said, Dale Hoke, the CISO here at RegScale, 28-year Navy vet, 5 years of government compliance work, which made me want to drop an anvil on my head. Left compliance and started to do security operations in the commercial space for a few years. Wrapped that up with managing the security operations center at NYPD. And then I was the first security hire and employee number 8 here at RegScale, and I've been here for the last 3.5 years. And I consider it a personal crusade to try to fix the compliance space and to make it easier, particularly in the government and the DoD.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here, Dale. We're all looking forward to learning from your insights today. And also with us, we have Tom Volpe Jr. He's Vice President for Cybersecurity, Risk, and Compliance at C2 Labs. Welcome, Tom. Would you like to introduce yourself and your background?
Thanks, Travis. I appreciate the opportunity to share my perspective today. So I'm the Vice President of Cybersecurity, Risk, and Compliance Services for C2 Labs. And at the C2 Labs, we provide advisory services to organizations that are seeking compliance with cybersecurity frameworks such as FISMA, FedRAMP, and CMMC. And we focus on getting these organizations ready for their independent assessment by their independent third-party assessors. I've been doing this for over 2 decades now, and one of the most interesting things that I've found is, to echo what Travis just said, is that not a lot has changed. And so I'm looking forward to sharing my perspective with you today on what I think we can do to reimagine the ATO.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here, Tom. And let's hop right into it. So let's start with Tom. From your perspective, what are you seeing in the market? Being out there as an advisor, talking to clients in multiple different industries, what are people doing that's holding them back?
Yeah, and it begins with where we just started. Not a lot has changed, right? So many of my organizations that I'm working with are still treating compliance as a documentation exercise, and they should really be treating it as a security enabler. We're still seeing a lot of manual control assessments, either annually or every 3 years. We're seeing static documents and spreadsheets as evidence. Compliance is an afterthought, and it's not built into operations. And we're checking boxes. We're not reducing risk.
Awesome. Well, what about tooling? How has the tooling changed? I think I was using Excel back in the 1995 days. I'm old enough to remember that. But I still talk to lots of folks who are still living in Excel hell. How has tooling really evolved?
Well, unfortunately, again, not a lot has changed. We've seen a lot of new tooling introduced over the last 5 to 10 years in the marketplace. The federal government, a lot of this was driven by the DHS CDM initiative, which brought a lot of tools to federal government agencies. But unfortunately, we're still seeing that the most sophisticated environments are still relying on outdated approaches. They're still using Word, Excel, email. There's a massive disconnect between the operational tools like your endpoint detection and response, or your SIEM tools, or your CMDB, and the tools we use to do compliance tracking. And you really can't automate your way out of copy and paste. So I think it's time to start thinking a little bit differently about how we approach some of this stuff.
Absolutely. And Dale, on your end, when you think about that disconnect, what problems does it cause the business? As sort of the owner of the security program at RegScale, when you think of the lack of tooling, sort of What's the impact in your world? How does it hurt the business?
Well, and I think that if you look at compliance as a cost center instead of a business center, then it becomes a cost center. So then you build isolated and stovepiped processes, and then you block communications, and people aren't aware of what's going on. I think it's incumbent upon us to kind of move from, and Tom summarized it best. Move from the Excel spreadsheets, right? Get out of the compliance as a checklist and understand that the outcomes of compliance is better cyber resilience. And we've seen a move in the market of people kind of embracing that and realizing cyber resilience is the goal, right? And how do we get there? And that's, I think, hopefully we can help walk some people through that today. Because if you continue to look at it as a cost center, if you don't recognize that your compliance is a business objective that helps you get to yes, right, and then maximizes your security, you're really kind of living in 1999.
And Tom, when you sit down with customers like a Dale and you come in with your C2 Labs hat on, how do you hit the ground running? What's the C2 Labs approach to helping them understand the art of the possible?
Absolutely. So we're having a lot of success with customers. Instead of focusing on compliance, we focus on outcomes. And the way we've done that is we've shifted to focusing on security capabilities instead of controls. And then we leverage automation pipelines for evidence collection using things like APIs. And then we can automate documentation reviews, leveraging machine readable compliance documentations available in standards such as OSCAL. And so what we're really trying to do is transform compliance from a checkbox into a continuous data-driven risk management process.
Awesome. And so let's hop into sort of the real world. We just finished, we spent a lot of money and time on getting our FedRAMP high. We've got our SOC 2. We've gone through this a couple different ways. And at RegScale, we've used AI and automation all throughout that process. So maybe, Dale, can you start me off with just some of what were the big wins and lessons learned you got from leveraging AI and automation to help get those outcomes?
So I think the first success goal was we built a program understanding what the end state was. So by building good policies and good procedures, right, we were able to get good outcomes. So because we could use AI against the policies and procedures that we took a lot of painstaking time to develop, that we had good source data. And I've heard people. It took us about using AI. Tom and I were able to write the original SSP in under 2 weeks, where it takes most professional service providers 3 to 4 months to get a good, reliable SSP. And quite frankly, that was with the evidence gathering of a lot of the manual processes, right? So, because I had good documentation to pull from, we were able to derive good implementation statements. Then from there, right, we knew what evidence we needed, right? By working, uh, a lot of people who've gone through audits, the thing that you hear is it's subjective. By removing the subjectivity and having using AI to gather a lot of the evidence documentation, then we were able to produce evidence in a very timely manner. And then at the end, right, the QA piece, we were able to get the differentials right and identify gaps by using AI to tell us right where we missed the mark. Right, when you're writing and you're moving a bunch of control pieces, for example, AC2. Anybody who's tried to write AC2, that thing could be a nightmare, right? And then after you write it, right, a lot of times you take a deep breath and right, you sigh of relief, and then you forget to go back and check your work, right? And now AI checking your work and validating the effort that you're put into it was a key factor. So it saved us. I mean, when you're a small organization building something as complex as a FedRAMP high package and ensuring all the processes, procedures are in place, that's complex. Without AI, I don't think we'd have got there in the budget that we had set out or in the time that we had set out.
Well, it's exciting to hear how you're using things like compliance as code, extreme automation, and AI to really accelerate productivity in your role here at RegScale. Junior, is that consistent with what you're seeing in the market, or would you like to share your perspective on what you're seeing with clients?
Absolutely. So we're seeing success using AI as automation enabler, not a replacement. So AI tools are great at identifying issues or correlating findings and streamlining documentation development, but you still need the human analyst, right, to validate and explain the enterprise risk. And so I think a key takeaway is that AI doesn't eliminate compliance teams, but it makes them more scalable. And the real win here is speed and insight to and audit readiness. And so, like to echo what Dale was saying, I share that same story on AC2, right? I remember Dale and I sitting in a conference room, and I spent about 3/4 of one day writing it up manually. And then we said, "Hey, let's test this AI tool we have here." And we were able to reproduce that output in minutes. And we put the two side by side, and we were like, "Wow, that's pretty close." But it still takes that compliance analyst, that SME, right, to validate what's coming out of these large language models. So treat AI as an enabler and not a replacement.
Yeah, and maybe while we're on that topic, help me sort of separate fact from fiction. How good is the AI today? So when you think about using it, how much work does it eliminate? Is it as good as they say it is? Sort of level set with the audience on what you can expect from a fine-tuned AI model in this space.
Sure. So from a C2 Labs perspective, I've always, one of my soapboxes is it gets you about, right now we're seeing about 80% of the way there. I use the 80-20 rule. So at C2 Labs, what we like to do is we use AI and large language models to help us automate the redundant tasks that the humans have to do, lining up all your requirements, getting that first pass through an implementation statement that gets you 80% of the way there, right? And then we take a human cybersecurity analyst and we give them a set of proof points, and that they run through those proof points, and it fills in that other 20%. So that's where we're at today. Now, I have full confidence that as AI continues to develop, we'll get to a place where we'll be able to ask the right questions and feed those answers into a large language model and get a lot closer to that 100%. But the key takeaway here is from our perspective is right now AI and large language models should not be writing SSPs from scratch, but they're really good at summarizing and validating and augmenting existing documentation.
Awesome. Well, Dale, we've talked a bit about AI here, which is exciting and on top of everybody's mind. But in GRC engineering, I'm hearing a lot about compliance as code. On the compliance as code front, one, can you tell people kind of what it is from your perspective? And two, if I'm new to this world, I'm an old school GRC Excel guy or girl. How do I get involved and learn more? Are there places I can go, working groups I can attend? What does the community look like?
Sure. So when we start talking about compliance as code, I think two things, right? I think baking compliance in early into your pipeline, right? You hear the process of DevSecOps. Uh, if you identify the compliance requirements and you use DevSecOps in the pipeline and you capture that data early and use that in your packages, you just maintain visibility from start to deployment and production, and it's a lot easier to get those compliance outcomes if you bake it in early. The other piece of this, and Travis, you alluded to it, is OSCAL, right? Building compliance at the component level, right? And then rolling it up into a machine readable format and then exporting that into something that can be validated, right? So you're building validated packages at the code level. You're ensuring that they stay that way through your pipeline. At the end, you're generating uh, OSCAL packages, machine readable OSCAL packages that can be easily validated because anybody's been through an approval process for either an ATO or FedRAMP package or anything like that. 90% of the time burn is waiting for your package to be reviewed, which is a largely manual process. This does away with all that. You can review 410 controls in a matter of minutes where it would take months. And then on the back end of that, it's all about saving time, right? Making it faster. That's how we move from it being a cost center to being a business center. And then and I'm sure Tom will have some feedback on this, right? He's heavily involved in NIST OSCAL, but on the NIST website, there are OSCAL working groups that you can find that you can attend. There's actually OSCAL training sessions that are available on the NIST site that walk you through the start of OSCAL, what it is, and how to use it in your environment. And then also, it's all about networking, right? You can reach out to Tom or myself on or Travis on LinkedIn, and we could talk you through how we see it being used. You see it a lot in FedRAMP 20X. I attend a lot of these meetings, right? They're the OSCAL outputs. And that automated machine readable package is becoming critical. People recognize the value of compliance as code, and I think now we're finally seeing in the market the move to see that value on the business side being accelerated.
Yeah, absolutely. And two others that I'll plug while we're here. One is the OSCAL Foundation. It's a nonprofit group that's looking to internationalize the standards. Another great place to get involved. And since we're here with the Cloud Security Alliance today, they've also got their CAR working group, Compliance Automation Revolution. Another great place to get involved if you want to learn more about compliance as code and contribute. One person who doesn't have to learn about compliance as code is Junior. You might argue in his past life, supporting the FedRAMP project management office, he helped run the largest compliance as code program in the world over at FedRAMP. Walk me through what that was like. What did you guys do well? What was that experience going? How far did you get into the promise of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very fortunate to spend about 5 years over at the FedRAMP PMO working on the automation team. This was prior to the FedRAMP 20X initiative. And a lot of the work that we did over those 5 years was sort of what kind of became the 20X program today. But we sponsored early on a couple of early adopters working groups for OSCAL. And right away, the key thing that we saw was that we had participation from small, medium, and hyperscale CSPs. And so the writing was sort of on the wall, right? Like everyone kind of agreed that there was a need for change, and it was time to do something different. So we had some early success where producing machine readable compliance documentation in OSCAL, where we could take checklist driven processes where it used to take the PMO 2 weeks to review a system security plan, and we have it in OSCAL, and we could write automated validations that would check the same things in minutes versus taking a human 2 weeks to review that output. And we were able to automate, again back to my 80/20 rule, we were able to automate about 80% of that work originally. And so that was very exciting. We also saw a lot of success leveraging OSCAL as an interoperability standard to connect tooling. So think about continuous controls assessment and automated artifact collection. You need a common standard to model all those assessment results in so that all the tooling can speak. And so we saw some success implementing OSCAL as that interoperability standard, and working with the DHS to feed some of that information into their federal dashboards. So that was really, really interesting. And OSCAL can be quite complex in the beginning, and but it is built to be kind of fully extensible to any organization, and you can expand it to model really any data you want to model. And then what we were seeing more recently, though, is because of some of the complexities of OSCAL, we're seeing organizations just take a move towards producing machine readable outputs in like XML or JSON as a stepping stone towards OSCAL. And then once they get used to doing that, then we can sort of convert some of those outputs into OSCAL as OSCAL matures, and organizations tailor it to fit their needs. But it's an exciting time. As a practitioner of 2 decades, I've sort of been standing on this soapbox for a while now. It's like, hey, we've got all this great tooling. How can we automate? And I'm really starting to see it happen. So it's a pretty exciting time to be in this business.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Between compliance as code and AI, it's just a very exciting time to revolutionize this industry. But I also do enough laps around the industry and talk to enough CISOs to know not everybody's excited. Some are scared. The idea of taking sort of the keys to the kingdom, all of my most sensitive data, my vulnerability information, and sending that off to an AI engine sounds like something that's going to bite me in the butt at some point in the future. Dale, can you walk me through just sort of how you got comfortable with it and sort of what are the best practices in validating AI solutions in this space?
Well, and I think first you have to become aware of what it is, right? And where the problems could be, right? You have to take time to understand the supply chain. You have to understand your models. You have to understand what hallucination is and prompt injection. How do you defend against that? Once I understood it, and then we deployed our security around it and put a bubble there, then I understood that, you, like anything else, you can expect what you inspect, right? So we keep an eye on it, we understand what's going on, and then you score, to Tom's point, you score the outputs, right? You ask it a question, you score the outputs, you validate what's being said, and then it becomes part of your operational landscape. So I became and once I started to audit, right, and build controls around my AI, and started to take some of, like, CSA's just put out an AI validation model, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do that's out there around AI to make it safe. First thing you got to understand, second thing you have to secure it, and third thing you have to do is validate it. AI is not perfect, right? It doesn't replace people, to Tom's point earlier. So you have to take the time to really lean in, right? Review some of the processes, understand it. But once AI gets asked the question enough, and it gets enough positive answers, then it gets better and better, right? So, like anything, you build from the foundation, and then you scope it as you need it. Um, I think AI is a really great tool to achieve a good risk posture, and to achieve very solid outcomes on everything on the compliance front.
Yeah. Thank you, Dale. And maybe let's pivot and let's make it real. So let's say I'm a old school GRC person. I'm still rocking the 1999 Excel. I'm a button clicker. I probably got more of an accounting background than a cyber background. I hear all this AI DevSecOpsy stuff, and I don't know how to do any of that. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a data scientist. Make it real for me. Walk me out of how do I get started and then what's in it for me. And so I'll start with you, Junior, and just kind of how do you get people over that cultural barrier?
Sure. I think you just have to start small. You have to focus on your pain points. You're going to pick high effort, low complexity tasks. Examples are any manual repetitive tasks like evidence collection or documentation updates, data intensive tasks like log analysis or risk scoring, or error prone tasks like your old spreadsheet based plan of actions and milestones or your SSP review. These are all good examples of tasks that are like ripe for AI and automation. And again, I like to stay on my soapbox, but you want to use your AI to augment, not replace your human compliance processes. Um, you know, we've seen a lot of success automating evidence collection using APIs to pull real-time evidence from source systems like your hyperscale CSPs like AWS or Azure, or platforms like CrowdStrike. I would suggest starting with a small pilot project. Pick one use case, leverage AI-enabled tool, preferably one that uses a large language model that's private or run on-prem, so that you can alleviate some of the security concerns that executives tend to have around using these AI models. And then you want to make sure you have the right team structure. So you're going to need to incorporate compliance SMEs, data engineers, and AI personnel into an integrated team to really have success. Using these technologies, and make sure you have access to data, both unstructured and structured data. Your SSPs, your audit logs, your tickets. These are all things we find helpful when we're training our AI large language models to support our compliance programs.
Thanks, Junior. How about your perspective, Dale? How did you get started on your journey? Like just from dead cold to I want to get started with something. Walk me through how I baby step my way into this.
Well, and I mean, I was completely resistant to AI at first, right? I was, as a security guy, I was full stop. But I was, no AI, not doing it. I'm gonna pout, right? Because it's once you have a system in place, and I can understand why people still use Excel, because it works, and you've built the process, and you spend a lot of time and energy, right, to build it. Um, then you start to, so when I finally relented and said, okay, did a little homework. All right, this isn't evil, right? This isn't going to take over the world, at least not yet, right? We're not in the Terminator movies. I got to spend some time to understand it. So, how's it secured? How are we controlling the data that's coming into the environment and putting up the gates, right? You could, by putting firewalls, controlling the questions that can actually be asked, right? Validating the supply chain of the large language model you're using, say whether it's OpenAI or whatever you're using. That's the first step. Become familiar. I had to spend a lot of time becoming familiar. And then I would talk to, and this is going to sound weird, but then I would talk to the AI and ask it the questions that I didn't have the answers to and see what the responses were, right? How do we protect from hallucination? How do you protect from prompt injection attacks and things like that, and then validate that? So I was very elementary in my approach, right? And it took me a lot longer, I think, than most people to get there because I'm severely old school. But at the end, right, I understood that with all things, right, I was able to be comfortable with how we secured it. And then I saw immediate resource optimization on everything that I was doing, right? So we started to use it on evaluating some of the security inputs that we're getting from the seam, and then we were getting rapid turnaround and evaluations. The compliance front, I was able to apply. I was able to write, like Tom and I talked about AC2, or you talk about CM6 or CM6.5, or any of the large controls. We were able to write really accurate control implementation statements because we had very accurate policies going in, and we were able to use AI to extract that data, tune our control implementation statement, and then have a really great product at the end. Okay, now I'm getting more and more confident, and I'm stretching my legs. So as we, don't be afraid of it, right? I can tell you from experience, I was scared to death. Don't be afraid of it. Lean in, learn it, then learn how to use it, and then evaluate it, right? And as you get more confidence in it, then you're going to see better outcomes. And as you learn how to ask it the questions that you need the answers to, then you'll be more comfortable with it, I think.
Absolutely. And so, one, it's great to hear, Dale, that you're able to go from old school CISO who was dead scared of it to being supportive. I got to take away all my old CISO jokes of CISOs. They put the no in innovation, or we're not happy, so you're not happy. All the traditional ones, but being able to lean in and support the business is key. While we're on that topic, RegScale did fund a state of the market on continuous controls monitoring. A few stats are up here. What they really tell you is that we're at the early stages of this. So since we're talking business value, maybe starting with you, Junior, kind of walk me through what are the key KPIs and business outcomes you would measure success by in implementing a program like this.
Sure. So first, we'll start with FedRAMP. One of the things they've done very well with the 20X program is they've published a set of key security indicators. This is near and dear to my heart because I preach a lot about security capabilities based cyber instead of chasing controls. Focus on outcomes and capabilities. And so these KSIs that FedRAMP has published are sort of organized around capabilities. So things like change management, identity and access management, monitoring your and logging and auditing. So that's a great place to start, is with the FedRAMP 20X key security indicators up on fedramp.gov. Dale and I also are involved in a working group for continuous ATO with ATARC, the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. And we actually published a paper on it was meant to be a start towards implementing continuous authorization to operate in 100 days. And in that document, we've also included a couple of key security indicators that are a good place to start. These are things like mean time to patch. What's the average time it takes you to patch a system from the time you discover a vulnerability? Mean time to detect a vulnerability. Things like compliance drift. How are you gradually diverging between a compliance standard and your implementation? And then security debt, like measuring the backlog in your remediation efforts. These are just a few examples of what's in that ATARC paper. But there are many other key security indicators that we've included. It's a good place to start for those of you that are new to this sort of thing. Go check that paper out.
Awesome. And Dale, maybe give me like a 90-day plan. You know, if you're trying to get to those metrics, what does the first 90 days look like, and sort of how do you get moving?
So, in my opinion, the first thing you need to do is start by organizing your organization, if that's the way to say that. But laying in some organization around your enterprise, right, and organize your controls and your capabilities, right. Line everything up, and then you need to kind of turn on some tooling, right. Get the data to where it needs to go. So implementing tooling that particularly is API centric and capable of producing OSCAL, right? And I can't say enough, right, how important OSCAL is, in my opinion. Like you could do a lot of different machine readable formats, but OSCAL was designed around compliance. And to get the outcomes, I really think that we need to really focus on producing the OSCAL results. And then Tom alluded to the ATARC CATO playbook, right? That playbook provides a great foundation for implementing modern compliance program. It was designed to highlight things you can achieve in your first 100 days. And that we spent about a year putting this all together, talking to different vendors and understanding how this was supposed to work. I think that's a great place to start is organize it, deliver it, right? Focus on the outcomes of your automation, and then evaluate it.
Awesome. And Junior, to wrap up, maybe same question to you. Give me sort of your 90-day plan when you start with a client of sort of what you advise them to do. And then last thought to leave the audience with, just give me if there's one thing to take away to get started, what would be your key takeaway to wrap us up? So over to you, Junior.
Sure, thanks. So again, I can't say this enough. A healthy modern program is one that focuses on outcomes over compliance check boxes. So I start with my customers around. Dale just alluded to this. Organizing your compliance controls around a set of cybersecurity capabilities so that you can provide additional context. What does it mean to fail AC2? Well, AC2 might be one of many controls that supports an overall capability of identity and access management, right? So what does that mean? So when you start to organize your controls in terms of security capabilities, now you move towards informed risk management, right? And then the second thing I ask them to do is have a comprehensive information security continuous monitoring strategy. So you're moving from point in time, once every year, once every 3 years assessment to really an environment of continuous controls assessment. And so you have to have a plan to do that. And then what that allows us to do, the combination of modeling over, controls as capabilities and continuous controls monitoring, it allows us to implement, a document once, assess continuously, and reuse many times approach, where you can distribute out your capabilities across an enterprise and really increase that return on investment, drive cybersecurity outcomes, and lower risk. So those are really the key things that I like to talk to my clients about when we're starting out.
Awesome. Well, I want to end by thanking you, Tom and Dale, for taking time out of your day to participate in the panel. Certainly decades of knowledge and experience here working with the largest organizations on the planet for how you do this at scale well. And so hopefully the audience has picked up a lot of useful information they can take back to their organizations. I had an old boss in a past life who used to tell me that the best plans start with the truth. You can accept it now or you can accept it later. It'll still be true. It's always faster and cheaper to accept the truth now. And I think the truth is that AI and compliance as code and automation are game changers in the field of risk and compliance. And so the sooner that you're able to accept that truth, to action it, and to deploy it, you can move risk and compliance program from this sucking cost center in the back office to something that is a sustainable competitive advantage for your org. And so I wanted to thank the Cloud Security Alliance for hosting this distinguished panel today. Thank the audience for their attendance. We hope you all learned something you can take back and make your organization more secure and more compliant. So thank you very much.